We the lazy declare that we will recline when we feel inclined. And yes, we feel inclined.
We answered our kids' questions all day. It's our time to prioritize, no priorities.
Why?
Because
We put in back-to-back doubles, so now we'll be putting in extra OT right here.
We've checked off our to-do list.
Now we're checking off our to-don't list.
We the lazy are taking back lazy.
By getting comfy on our Lazy Boy furniture.
Lazy Boy. Long live the lazy.
Time, weather, and
How you doing, everybody? I'm Chief Meteorologist Denis Phillips. Heat, still the hot topic of weather conversation, right? Just smashed the previous record for rainfall in Tampa. That's still a very nice day. We've got some clouds out there, even a couple of sprinkles as another front rolls through the area. Most of us wake up to sunshine and then very warm temperatures in the afternoon. Our temperatures, they're going up and they're staying up. Really nice forecast, especially if you're planning on going to the beach or the pool. Rain chances very slim. Another beautiful day in store. It's going to bring us a very high chance of storms. Some isolated showers across the area. Mother Nature likes to remind us that it isn't set by a calendar. We're always on it for you just in case things begin to pop.
Streaming from the ABC Action Weather Center in Studio A, this is Denis Phillips Live. Sponsored by Lazy Boy Furniture Galleries. Long live the lazy.
How you doing, everybody? Tuesday night edition of Denis Phillips Live, the night before DPL Plus debuts tomorrow night with Nadine Yanis. We are, every week or two, we're going to be having a Wednesday night edition of DPL. It's going to be more of a news-driven event as opposed to chit-chat, squirrel. No, there's still going to be chit-chat. There's still going to be fun. But the news people will be here, and they're going to be talking about issues that are going on with you. Tomorrow, it's insurance. So we're going to be talking all about questions about insurance. We're going to be playing some of our stories that ran in the hurricane special. Now, I will be completely honest and open with you because that's the way I am with you. You guys know me like, I mean, you know, I'm just completely transparent, and you know me like, what is it, the back of your hand? Is that the expression? I haven't seen the hurricane special yet. Just admit it. I mean, I made it. I put it together. I voiced it. I, was involved, but I actually didn't watch it. Now, I was talking to some people who did, and they said they liked it. It was good information, a lot of good information on hardening your home, a lot of good information on insurance. Nadine does all that. And what we did is we went to the Palm Harbor Hurricane Expo, which there's another Hurricane Expo this Saturday in Tarpon, which I'm also going to be at. And we went and people were asking us questions. So we put those questions on, and then I kind of did my whole thing where I took that question and then morphed it into a lead into a package that ran on whatever the case may be. See, and that is my forte. You put something in front of me with words on it, I'll mess it up. But if you just let me talk and don't give me script, I can go on for a long time. And you guys all know that who's watching here right now. So the producers literally will say, Denis, talk for a minute 10. Denis, talk for 45. There's no script. There's nothing. They just say, they have faith in me that we will somehow mold it all together and turn it into something. And apparently that's exactly what happened. So Nadine will be here tomorrow for DPL Plus, and she will be answering your questions. We're going to be talking about some insurance companies that have actually lowered their rates this year. We're going to be talking about ones where it may be easier to get coverage than others, questions you have about flood insurance, all of these things, renter's insurance, all of these things that are important. And I think one thing that's really important for newcomers is, if you don't live in a flood zone, maybe you don't need flood insurance. That's not my call. I'm not saying you do or don't. I'm saying maybe you don't. But remember, if you plan on getting flood insurance, you have to have it in place 30 days before the actual claim can be filed. It's kind of like the extended car warranty, which I won't even get into because I am having an absolute nightmare with my extended car warranty coverage place. True story, not going to get into it here. I posted it on Facebook like 3 weeks ago. The plot thickens. I still don't have my car back, and it's been almost a month. It's a true story. So we'll get into that if need be down the road, because I do think it's important to share things with you as you share things with me to prevent you from making the same blunder mistakes that I have made over my lifetime and clearly continue to make as I get extended auto warranty coverage that it's just been a nightmare. Anyway, I digress. So they are rerunning the show, but it's also available online and on demand. I'm not sure how. I will effort you that. That's what they always used to say. We will effort you that information. So I don't know. I think it's available online. I think you can literally just click on the website and boom, you'll have the different stories. But we're going to be running some tomorrow. That's a good idea. That is a good idea. You know what I'll do? I'll have our people upload segments from the hurricane special into my little computer thing here. And I can maybe once a show play one little segment. And then we can talk about it. Brilliant idea. Thanks for the suggestion. See, this is it. We got this back and forth thing going on, right? That's what makes this work. But before we get into any of this discussions, which we're talking about the heat, we're talking about the rainy season, we're talking about hurricane coverage, we're talking about hurricanes, all this stuff, tropical waves, very warm water. We got to do our hellos. Got to do our hellos. I mean, you know, what is it if we're not doing hellos? Oh, I've already missed a lot of the hellos that were early on. Wish you could see this computer. Your comments scroll down and then they're gone. And I'm not ignoring, they're gone. And Dora, how are you? Good to see you. Karen Homosassa, Adam Workaholic. Adam, you'll be happy to know that we have added the Miami Hurricane colors to our DPL Rule Number 7 collection stable of colors. So, starting June 1st, on our Etsy page, where you guys all know proceeds benefit Children's Miracle Network, All Children's, Feeding Tampa Bay, Sunshine Foundation, the list goes on and on. We will have USF, FSU, UF, UCF, Miami Hurricanes, UN, the Rays, the Bolts, the Bucks, all these colors available for Rule Number 7 stuff, for t-shirts and for bottles and cups and coffee mugs and the whole 9 yards. All available on June 1st. The site, we're getting it ready, and it's going to be everywhere. And again, all those proceeds benefit those local charities. So it's a great, great thing. So anyway, Adam, as I see your hurricane logo, that's why I thought of that. Denise, how goes it? Anthony Newport Richie. We've got Ren in Polito. By the way, everybody who came to the Crooked Thumb on Saturday, I want to thank you. I'm going to tell you a really neat little story here, and we'll get into the weather. If you're new to this, you're kind of like, wait a minute, where's the weather? I promise you the weather stuff comes. Not a lot going on anyway, right? I want to tell you this story because I think it's a great story. So first of all, thank you to everyone who showed up. It was supposed to be from 3 to 5. It turned out to be from about 2:30 to 7, and we stayed there the whole time. There was literally an hour line from where I was standing to the out of the door to get in to do some pictures and say hi and share stories and hugs and meet and greet and the whole 9 yards. An hour wait. Every single person waited at least an hour. And I thought that was absolutely amazing. And I'll tell you a little story. So it was like 5:30. The lines were out the door literally, and it was still very hot. And a man came over with his lovely wife and came over and introduced himself as Bill. And I'm like, hey, Bill, how you doing? And he goes, I just want you to, how you doing? I'm Bill. I'm from Scripps Corporate. Scripps owns our TV station, owns the Scripps Foundation, the Scripps Company, EW Scripps, the Spelling Bee, all that stuff. Scripps, we are a Scripps-owned station. And Bill was working within corporate for a long time, a very head honcho within Scripps, and came over, introduced himself to me, introduced himself to our head of promotions, who was my handler. Dennis was my handler. His name is Dennis, too. Dennis with 2 N's. He's my handler. He was taking the pictures. He was doing all this stuff. Really helpful. I needed it because there were 11 billion people there. But Bill came over with his lovely wife, Susan, and they were talking. And, you know, he mentioned that he was with corporate, and he was so impressed with the loyalty of the fans, so impressed with the turnout, and the fact that there were so many people. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate it, but I've been here a long time. And he's like, no, you know what? Your fans are special. Your fans are loyal, they're supportive, and this is exactly what we're trying to do. And you know what was also very impressive? Bill, who is a, you know, head honcho, could have cut the line, maybe could have gone over and said, hey, I'm with. Bill waited in line for an hour like everybody else to come up and say hi. And I thought that was absolutely amazing. So thanks to everybody who came over. It was really an amazing day. We raised a lot of money for the American Red Cross. We raised money for the local charities. We had a raffle going on. I mean, with Rule Number 7 stuff. And it was the kind of stuff that I would expect from y'all, because we have that kind of relationship. And if you're new to this, again, I'll say this, I've said it a million times. One of the comments way back when was, this is like 1,000 of us outside in the backyard, everybody in lawn chairs, talking over each other, and one big get-together. That's what this is like. This started more than a decade ago for the old timers, before Facebook ever did Facebook Lives. We would use a Ustream platform or a Procaster platform, and we had a get-together for some pizza over at International Mall in the food court one time, about maybe 40 or 50 of us, I can't remember. But I mean, this has been going on for a long time, and it's like family. And I know that sounds weird. I know it does, especially in a virtual world. But I had, and I'll say this and then I'll get to the weather, I promise. This warmed my heart. So there was a woman who came over. She might have been 25 or 30, and she moved into this area 2 or 3 years ago. And she said, I just want to tell you that I'm not on DPL as much anymore, but when I first moved here, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends. I was new to the area, and I went on DPL, and the people on that chat embraced me, and it felt like my family. And I was there for a year or so, and now I've kind of moved on, and I have my own friends in this area, and I don't have as much time to go on, but I wanted to thank you and everybody out there. Right there, that is what we do here. And every now and again, we get some people who don't get it, and this is not what they're here for. You know what? I get that, but this is what we are. We talk, we chat, we share stories, we talk about weather. And oh, by the way, if there's weather that's coming or there's serious weather, you know where we will be. We'll be here 24/7. We always are. I don't sleep during hurricane season because I know you guys don't either. So I want to share my information with you. But I just thought that story warmed my heart. And there were so many people that came by on Saturday. I recognized their name. I didn't recognize their face, but I do now. So I just want to thank everybody who came over, because it was really awesome. And then one other quick story. So this was not a good one. This was on Saturday. Some dude on Instagram messaged me. He's like, hey, why are you taking a screenshot of my wife drinking wine and putting it on your post? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm scouring my brain thinking, what could I have done where I took a screenshot of some guy's wife, and he has some Orlando site. I won't even post it. I won't even give him the recognition it doesn't deserve. But he's like accusing me. He's like, dude, I don't know why you're taking screenshots of other men's wives and putting it on Facebook, but that's up to you. And I'm like, or on Instagram, like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I scoured every one of my posts, and there was nothing there. Apparently, there was a, if you're watching on Instagram, you can maybe relate. There was a glitch in Insta where, for whatever reason, pictures from your personal gallery would show up on a post of someone else. And this guy's wife drinking a glass of wine showed up on his feed, but on my post. So that's what it was. So I'm like trying to diffuse the situation at first, and then I started getting mad because I'm like, dude, I expect an apology. And he never apologized, because people don't apologize when they screw up anymore. They just go on their own little merry way. But anyway, that was it. I could give his site, but I won't. But I should, because he was a jerk and was really rude for absolutely no reason at all, without looking into, oh, maybe it's something I did wrong. Whatever. Let's get into weather, shall we? Notice how warm everything is behind me. I mean, Cindy's like, I love story time. This is what we do, especially when there's not a lot going on. I mean, look, we've got a couple of tropical waves out there, okay? All right, so there it is. You have got a tropical wave here. You have got a tropical wave here. And there's a tropical wave farther out in the Atlantic. And you might ask yourself, how was the song? You might ask yourself, what's the song? You guys know it. Did go by the waterfall. Is it the Red Hot Chili Peppers? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, you may ask yourself, what is a tropical wave? A tropical wave is nothing more than a disorganized area of thunderstorms, all right? And as a disorganized area of thunderstorms moves across the tropical Atlantic or into the Caribbean, no, it's not Devo. It's definitely not Talking Heads. That's what it was, Jules. You're right, Talking Heads. Same as it ever was. Yes, thank you. So as they come across, see, this is kind of the progression we go through in hurricane season. So last year, we had an El Nino, right? And an El Nino has hostile upper level winds. So as tropical waves are trying to organize, right, trying to develop into an organized system, which creates an uplift, right? As it's trying to happen, those upper level winds create a hostile environment for them and they don't develop very well. Well, a La Nina, alas, is the opposite. And a La Nina creates more favorable upper level winds, in other words, calmer upper level winds, which can allow waves to develop into a more organized system, thus a depression, a storm, or a hurricane, right? Okay, so it is very early in the season to ever expect a system out in the tropical Atlantic or the Caribbean to develop. Now, on the other side of the coin, and boy, you have heard this, look behind me, look how warm that water temperature is. Water temperature, clear water is 90 degrees. I went and looked just a few minutes before the show, went and looked and see if I have ever seen a 90-degree Gulf temperature this early in the season. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, I just couldn't find it. And I will continue to look, because maybe it has. But the point is, you have all this warm water, and you've heard it over and over again. Warm water, all these hurricanes. Look, there are way more things that come into play in a developing tropical system than just an abnormally warm area of water. And we always talk about the Saharan dust, all right? Well, the Saharan dust is one of those things that is also going on, as it typically does in June and July. Usually, the dust off of Africa limits development. So, what do we have going? Let's list them. June is a month that is typically pretty quiet. If you do get a system in the Caribbean or the Gulf, more often than not, it's a very weak system that provides a lot of rain. We have had many drought-busting tropical systems move through in the month of June that have been beneficial. So that is certainly a possibility, okay? This is not a La Nina yet, but it is expected to become La Nina later in August into September. We are in a neutral. All it is, El Nino is excessively warm water off the coast of Argentina from the Pacific. When that goes from warm, transitions to neutral, and eventually transitions to cold, it goes to a La Nina. That's why it's called La Nina. It's called El Nino because off the coast of Argentina, around Christmas time, the anchovy fishermen would notice that their anchovy crop would take a hit. And the reason it was taking a hit was because of all of the warm water. Thus, they named it El Nino, the Christ child. That's how the name started. So, the things you learn here. So anyway, point being, just like our rainy season, it doesn't go El Nino, boom, La Nina. It transitions, right? Just like our rainy season. You hear us talking about the second week in June as the rainy season. There's no switch. I feel like Elizabeth Montgomery in Bewitched. That's an old school one. You don't have that, right? And it immediately turns into the rainy season. It transitions from dry May, hot May, to eventually more rainy season stuff. Now, what is the biggest player in that? That would be an east to southeast flow. We didn't have that last year. Why did we not have that last year? All right, we're getting sciencey on you here, but I'm going to talk about this. Last summer, we had trough after trough on the eastern third of the U.S. Fronts, lows, troughs. A trough is a valley, a ridge is a mountain. A trough is a valley, a ridge is a mountain. A ridge is a mountain of air that can block things from coming through. A valley, things can come into it. And when you get valleys along the eastern third of the U.S., we get westerly flow, right? Westerly winds. Why is that bad for our area? Because a westerly wind brings the rain in off the Gulf. It normally doesn't get its act together until east of I-75 with the heating of the day and moves east. Now, when the water temperature is 84 degrees in the Gulf or greater, especially at a decent depth, we sometimes see morning showers along the Gulf Coast, but the bulk of the rain is still inland. We do not want a westerly wind. We do not want a troughy eastern third of the U.S. for us to get our fair share of rain. Historically, we don't. So, we have a westerly wind now because of a front that just came through. We're going to have it a couple of days. Low humidity, just like a desert, the lower the humidity, the drier the air, the hotter it can get. That's why deserts are the hottest place on Earth, because the air is exceptionally dry. It's also much easier to be colder, too. Works both ways, but not for Florida, right? So, the heat will be on the next few days. We're going to be up around 100 degrees in inland areas, okay? Thursday and Friday, another front, and then we look at the ridge to try to build in from the weekend into early next week with an easterly flow. Now, we already said, an easterly flow in June is not as helpful as one in August, because in July and August, you have more energy, more heat, more moisture readily available, and you're going to see a better chance of significant rains, late day storms, our rainy season. In June, we're not quite there yet. It's a transition. Remember, we're going from one of the hottest, driest months of the year in May, historically, to the rainy season. But it doesn't go from here to here. It goes here to there. And this is June, and this is July, and this is August, and this is September, and then it goes away. Okay? Yes, it is, Maryland, 20-year anniversary of Charlie, which means the 20-year anniversary of me wearing those ridiculous suspenders that I wear. True story, but you guys know. If you know, you know, and you know. And if you don't know, you'll know eventually. So, that is correct, Beth. That is correct. So, I don't think we're going to hit 100 in Tampa. I think we already hit 100 in Plant City this week. We already hit 100 in Lake Placid this week in the past 7 days. I think we hit again tomorrow and into Thursday, okay? So, tropical waves, you see them there. Tropical waves in June, look, we've all heard about how warm the water is, and that is a wild card, I guess you could say. But at the end of the day, I'm going to show you this. I ain't worried about June storms. That one may come back to bite me in the rear end, but I'm not. There is the forecast, right? We all know lots of storms named. That does not forecast landfall. That just forecasts how many are going to form. That's it, right? That's all it is. So when you look at June and July, you see the Gulf is in blue. Look at the number of storms, not too many, and the ones that do develop are typically helpful, beneficial rainmakers when we need it. So we have had many a drought busted. Back in 2018, maybe, Alberto, I believe. Susan and Hudson, how you doing? You're very welcome, Paula. I try to provide some levity, some entertainment, and some sciencey stuff. All in a 30-minute show, packed full of everything, including nonsense. Some people are like, what am I watching here? Click, gone. It does work both ways. So, there is a look at August, and that's when the tropical Atlantic, where those waves are now, remember the waves we talked about? These waves right here. Well, in August, then you look at those and you're like, okay, we got to keep our eyes on those, even in July, mid to late July. But historically in June, they are really not much of a threat. It is more of a rainmaker. September, even more so. But I want you to look at something, and this to me is huge. And this, look, this is my attempt to take people off of the ledge a little bit, because I know you're hearing the hype everywhere. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. More storms than ever before, blah, blah, blah. I repeat, statistically speaking, a high number of storms developing has never impacted the Bay Area one way or the other in terms of landfalling probability. We all know we're going to get one at some point. We all know there's going to be a major storm at some point, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is going to be during an active year more so than an inactive year. We live in Florida. I mean, look at this. We're stuck out in the middle of the water here, right? We're surrounded by water. Of course, we are going to get hurricanes. It goes with living in Florida. So, but I want you to look at what the most common track is in September. This is huge. And this is why I get frustrated with everybody who's like, oh, we're going to have 25 storms, we're all going to die. I mean, that's what people say. Look, we all know hurricanes can be dangerous. We all know they can be deadly, unfortunately. I think a lot of folks with Irma tragically found out in Fort Myers because they were on the edge of the cone and they weren't expecting it. And let's be honest, the people in Fort Myers were expecting that storm to be more north of them, which is probably why they weren't as prepared as they would have been. And that is a dangerous thing to go through. If you're in that cone, you got to assume the probability. But I get it. You think I'm on the edge. I understand that. But did you know that that cone has nothing to do with the forecast of that particular hurricane? Did you know that? When you see a cone, that margin of error is not based on that storm. It's based on the average margin of error in terms of distance over the last 30 years. It has nothing to do with the forecast on that storm. The center line is the track that the Hurricane Center releases, and the cone is the margin of error based on 24, 48, 72, 96, and 120 hours out. It has nothing to do with that forecast. And that's important to remember. Yep, and I can tell Beth did not know that. Beth did not know that. So, did I not say Ian? I thought I said Ian. I don't know. I know Irma was the one too, but I know Ian, obviously, with Fort Myers. Anyway, look at the red area. Look at the legend. The red area is the most common track of September storms. What does that show you? That the majority of the storms that form in September in the tropical Atlantic curve away from the U.S., based on the positioning of the Bermuda High. So that should tell you something. That just because there may be 20 or 25 named storms does not mean the majority will impact anyone. But what needs to be remembered is, yeah, if 9 miss us, but 1 hit us directly as a Cat 4, that's all that matters. It only takes 1. So you have to prepare for that 1. And use opportunities like the tax-free weekend or a 2-week stretch that's coming up from June 1 till whenever to help prepare yourself. Get your plan of attack so you're ready and you know what you need to do. And that's the whole rule number 7 stuff, not freaking out. Look, if you know in advance where you're going to go and what you're going to do, you're not going to have to think. You're just going to do. But if it's 36 or 48 hours out and you don't have a plan and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I got to leave now. What am I going to do? You're wasting precious time that you could have already been ready. But I repeat, you know me, I don't focus on worst case scenario. And I also don't focus on best case scenario. I focus on realistic expectations. And I get so sick and tired of seeing the forecast always focusing on the worst case forecast. That doesn't do anybody any good service. It just scares people, and when it doesn't happen the majority of the time, which it will not, they're going to start taking it with a grain of salt or ignoring you entirely. So you give people a more realistic interpretation of what you think is going to happen, and you go with that. And when you look at that red area right there, that is the track of most September storms. All right, so if you're watching on streaming, we're going to continue this tomorrow with Nadine Yanis at 7:30, DPL Plus. We're going to be talking hurricane kits, we're going to be talking insurance, and we're going to be talking more on the tropics. Thanks for watching on the streaming. I will continue on Facebook for a few minutes. Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow on DPL Plus. All right. So, as I repeat, you know, I am, and every now and again I get somebody accusing me of downplaying a storm, and that is absolutely not what I'm doing. But I ain't going to hype it either, all right? Because I don't think you get anywhere scaring people. At the end of the day, that's my mantra. If you're scaring people, eventually they're going to ignore you because you're going to be wrong more than you are right. Because if you're going to say, this is the one, this is the big one, this is, oh, look at this model, oh, look at this model. If you cherry pick models, which a lot of people do, in other words, they pick the worst model run and show that and post that, and then the next day the model's gone, nothing of the sort, but they just at that point go to the next one and ignore the fact that they'd scared the bejesus out of you on the earlier time, right? So my point is that to me eventually is just, it's just not my thing, right? So what I try to do, I don't downplay, but I'm not going to hype something because of a model run 9 days out showing a Cat 11 on top of wherever, right? So at the end of the day, what we try to do here is give a realistic expectation without creating undue fear. If we're 24 hours, 36, 48 hours out, and we feel as though that we're going to be hit by a major hurricane, trust me, we will not be downplaying anything. What we hope we'll be doing is reinforcing people who have decided to stay put and not evacuate because they're not in waters where they're not in the way of a storm surge issue. Because I will tell you, and the emergency operation folks say the same thing here. So the majority of people in our area do not need to evacuate because the majority of the people in our area do not live on the water. If you're evacuating because you're inland, you're evacuating because you do not want to deal with power outages for a week or two, and I get that. And if you have a place to go, more power to you. But I'm telling you right now, most EOC folks, if you live on the water, want you to go 5 or 10 miles in, and that's it. Go to a friend's house. Because clogging the roads unduly for people who don't need to evacuate but don't want to be without power is what can really lead to some devastation because there's no room on the roads for everybody, and there's an accident and people are getting stuck on the roads or stuck on the bridges, right? So we're going to talk more about this over the next few weeks, but and I want to hopefully get some EOC folks too about this. I know we talked about it in our hurricane special. I have not watched it, but I know we did. That is a big concern. The majority of the time, they would prefer people, if they're on the water, to just go in a few miles inland because you hide from the wind and you run from the water. Flat out. That is the most important thing to remember. You hide from the wind, you run from the water. And I was talking to some folks on Saturday at the Crooked Thumb who now live on the beach. You know, and I said, I'm in a real tricky situation here because 95% of our viewers are probably not interested in what's happening with storm surge on the water because it won't impact them. And the 5% that live on the water are, but I don't want to give all my time for that because then it's ignoring the other folks, which is why a platform like this is great because we can talk as long as we want to and updating on social media as well. So at the end of the day, my point is this. If you live on the water, you have to have a plan of attack to leave, period. You may or may not be in a mandatory evacuation zone. If you're in an A or a B, you know, you're going to probably be told to leave if we have a major hurricane come. If you live 5 miles inland, you could very easily stay put and you'd be just fine. Now, if we're talking a 5, if we're talking a massive storm coming in directly to the Bay Area, which we live in Florida, you know, we're surrounded by this warm water. I mean, come on, let's be honest. We have opportunities to be facing these giant storms, and that is not hyping. That is living in Florida. That's life, right? So if you live on the water, you have to have a plan of attack, probably more so than if you live inland. If you live east of I-75, odds are you should stay put because traffic will be ridiculous unless you leave 72 hours out. Then you might have some room. But my suggestion to folks who live east of I-75, you just stay put and you ride it out. My suggestion, if you live 5 miles from the coast, you ride it out. Now, if we're having a strong 4 or a 5, you're still going to be okay inland, but you might lose power and you might have trees down. So at that point, you have to decide, and if you live in a situation where you can't have the power out because of health reasons or whatever, those are things that you have to decide on your own. These are things to plan in advance. This is why having this hurricane kit and this plan of attack is just so important. All right? Okay, Anthony is asking a question. I will answer a few questions, and then I'm going to go watch the Panthers and the Rangers play hockey. Okay. Anthony has a question. So, Anthony, what would your question be? Okay. And let me see. Yeah, knowing your zone is huge. Knowing your zone is monstrous. Because if you're in a mandatory evacuation zone A, then, there's times where you're going to need to leave. But again, you don't got to go to Orlando. You don't got to go to Atlanta. You might want to go 5 miles inland. Stay with a friend who lives inland. Honestly. Okay, Daniel is wants to know why October is our most vulnerable month. All right, it's a good question. Why is it? Look at the area in green. All right, I'm going to make a prediction for you right here, and you're going to be surprised by this prediction because it's kind of unlike with what I typically do, but I believe in this prediction. I think the panhandle of Florida is far more likely to see a hurricane this year than they have in the last couple of years. I think the northern Gulf Coast is far more likely to have a hurricane make landfall in that area than they have in the last couple of years. Statistically speaking, why is that? Because now that the Caribbean will be experiencing more systems in a La Nina from late August through September into October, a stronger storm, work with me here, very warm water, right? So whatever moves into the Western Caribbean is going to run into this warm water, and it's going to be drawn north quite often. Not always, sometimes they go across, but quite often they're drawn north. A stronger hurricane is drawn poleward toward the north. And it will tend, with all things being equal, which we all know in weather they're not, but if there's nothing really pushing on it one way or the other, that storm will just continue to go north, sometimes creating its own environment, by the way, if it gets strong enough, and go right into the panhandle, which is why Destin and areas like that get a heck of a lot more hurricanes than anybody else in Florida. Because a storm coming in from the south will go north. Why? Because there's nothing to kick it to the right. What would that right kick be? A front or a trough? How many fronts or troughs do we get in August and September? Not a lot. Sometimes, but not a lot. More likely you won't, which is why more likely a storm will go north. Now, look at this map in October. Storms that start in the Caribbean, where are they going? They historically can kick to the right, toward our area. And why might that be? Because we get fronts and troughs once we go to October. It's that simple. So the reason we are more likely to see a landfalling hurricane in October is because of it's more likely to have a turn with a trough or a front. And because the water is warmer this year, and because of a La Nina anticipated for September and October, there's expected to be more storms out there, more storms going into the Western Caribbean, getting stronger, moving north, and more likely going north into the Panhandle. But if they coincide with a trough, it'll kick west into the west side of Florida. That is why it is more likely. All right? So, that is it, folks. We will be back tomorrow night with lots of good hurricane prep information, lots of good insurance information, and we'll continue this conversation on Thursday on DPL as well. Look, The rainy season is still a ways away. Yes, historically, we start to see it in early June, but usually it's really July and August before things really get cranking. And there seems to be indications are that high pressure will be building in to give us more of an east to west flow, which is exactly what we need. All right. So hopefully we gave you some good information tonight. Remember, June 1st, all our new Etsy stuff with all our logos and everything, T-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, everything is going to be available as of June 1. Proceeds benefit all local charities, as we've always been saying. And I guess that's it. So have a good night, and I will see you on tomorrow night's edition of Denis Phillips Live. Thanks for stopping by, guys. See ya.
We the lazy declare that we will recline when we feel inclined. And yes, we feel inclined.
We answered our kids' questions all day. It's our time to prioritize, no priorities.
Why?
Because
We put in back-to-back doubles. So now we'll be putting in extra OT right here.
We've checked off our to-do list.
Now we're checking off our to-don't list.
We the lazy are taking back lazy.
By getting comfy on our lazy boy furniture.
Lazy Boy. Long live the lazy.